Hey, hey, hey. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, I am so glad you're here. This is the first Filter Free Friday of Black History Month. And if you are not familiar, every year I get the calendar from the Equal Justice Initiative. It's a history of racial injustice. And this is the 2023 calendar, but I get it every year. And it's one of the ways that I have a decent understanding of the history of race and racism and racial terror that has occurred here in this country. Because if we don't, um, what I think is a good quote to remember, and it's by Lucille Clifton. If you were not familiar with her work, she would say, "They ask me to remember." But they want me to remember their memories, and I keep on remembering mine. And that is again, a poem by Lucille, a quote by Lucille Clifton. And so when I go to the Equal Justice Initiative calendar for February 3rd, today, it says in 1948, Rosalie Ingram and her two teenaged sons are sentenced to die in Georgia for killing an armed white man who assaulted them. And the calendar is full every day of something that has happened historically. Some things as recent as, if I look at this month, of course, on February 23rd in 2020, Ahmaud Arbery was shot and killed. So that's here on the calendar. But this weekend, on February 5th, in 1917, Congress passes the Immigration Act of 1917. Listen to this: to bar entry of Asian, Mexican, and Mediterranean people, poor people, and those with mental or physical disabilities or criminal records. And that was 1917. And see, when we don't understand these kinds of things that are listed in the Equal Justice Initiative calendar, like the history of racial injustice, and look, every day you'll get just a little simple fact to help you remember and know what has occurred here. Now, why is that important, and why am I talking about that on a Filter Free Friday? Well, there's a Instagram page I follow called Black Liturgies, and they say the oppressor can never be trusted as a historian. Our task is preservation. You see, the methods have never changed. You know, when you look at the Immigration Act of 1917, my question would be, what is different about that and the legal immigration tactics that our former president Donald John Trump tried to employ when he said Mexicans were criminals and such? It's the same kind of language. And we're not going to take poor people, right? That was part of a narrative in 2019 around um, S-hole countries. I mean, that was the narrative. And so when you think that everything that happens is something new, then that's problematic because then you're always trying to recreate the will. And so today I wanted to talk about um, exactly what has what is occurring in Florida because I got tagged multiple times in posts about the AP African American Studies course being gutted and the College Board kind of upholding that idea. Um, And Trent, I thank you for your question. The Equal Justice Initiative calendar is not sharing anything about goodness. It is a history of racial injustice in this country, and that's what the calendar is highlighting. And I believe that part of the reason why that needs to be shared, if you're looking for good things, you can find those in all of your U.S. history courses, um, because what we don't want to say and what often gets conflated with the anti-empathetic stance is that during Black History Month, Carter G. Woodson created Negro Week in order to celebrate the accomplishments of African Americans. And so that makes me think about, like, Barbara Jordan, who was the first Black woman since Reconstruction to serve in the United States Congress, and she was a senator from the state of Texas. Um, and we should celebrate that. But if we just say she was the first without acknowledging that she was the first Black person that white people allowed to be a senator, and we don't want to use plain language. And I say plain language is nothing if not empathetic. Because when we go back in history and we rewrite it in our favor, what we end up with is what you are seeing happen in Florida. And I'm like, I appreciate you tagging me, sugar, but this is not new. And when we decide that also as Black people, we are going to further disparage Black people, whether they be poor, whether they be queer, or for whatever reason, we are also helping those people who are trying to oppress get their work done. The strategy has consistently been the same: distract, divide, destroy. And when I think about the contributions of Barbara Jordan, you can't talk about Barbara Jordan without acknowledging that Barbara Jordan was with Nancy Earl for 36 years until she died. Barbara was with Nancy for 36 years until she died. Barbara Jordan was lesbian. And so when we support the gutting of African American literature content because it has information about queer people in it, hmm, I wonder why the empathy is missing, because we know exactly what it feels like to be left out, left behind, to be at the other end of injustice. What causes us to then use those same tactics against queer people? When you consider the freedoms that we have today, you cannot consider those freedoms without acknowledging that Martin Luther King would not have been the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King without the help of Bayard Rustin, who was an openly gay man. He did not apologize for it, but he was a strategist that you've never seen, like you've never seen. How do you quote James Baldwin, listen to Reverend James Cleveland, uplift a local Dennis Moore, and not and then say you got some issue with queer folk? Your freedom, all of us, is tied up in Black people, queer people, and poor people. And when you use the same tactics that were used against you towards other people because they happen to be of a lesser status, they happen to have less power, we've got plenty work to do. You says empathy, the definition is being able to get into the skin of another person and walk around in it. I am befuddled by the idea that oppressed groups oppress. And I've read all of Paulo Freire's work about the pedagogy of the oppressed, and it still just shocks me. Charles M. Blow, wrote a masterful work called The Devil You Know. And when Charles came out and said that he was bisexual, it's very clear to me that that was detrimental to the way that people read his work and listen to him. And help me help me understand on this Filter Free Friday. I asked one of my thought partners and mentors, she might not know it, like, how do we fight this misinformation? How do we fight this when we can't figure out how to help people understand that the plight of poor people, the plight of Black people, the plight of gay people, the plight of the immigrant is all tied up together. Everyone is trying to be able to show up every day and be their best selves and make a contribution. It's just that simple. And I understand in my lived experience growing up in the church, how do you sit in the church and see the masculinity of a pastor, a Reverend Jimmy Woods Sr., but not acknowledge the brilliance and creativity of a Michael Charles, who was like as effeminate as he could possibly be, but both things tied up into the Black religious experience. That was what I grew up with. So I recognize that I have a bias towards uplifting the shared humanity, the inherent dignity that God gives everyone. Um, and I just want somebody to help me understand. You know, I want to go to Beyonce's concert. I do, but I'm seeing some of the ticket prices. I want to go to the Lakers game, and I saw that there's like $92,000 a seat. And I am never going to disparage anybody for what they want to spend their money on. Nope, you want to spend money on $92,000 tickets for an NBA game? Go for it. You want to spend $16,000 for tickets to see Beyonce? Go for it. Listen, I love Beyonce's music. I love her music. I love her music. Yet when we believe that wealth and the ability to afford the ticket somehow makes us better than, makes us able to disparage people who are complaining about the price of the ticket, be careful, sugar. Because when you're at the other end of those Memphis police officers, your money's not going to save you. It's not. Ask Michael Jackson. Ask any rich, wealthy, famous Black performer who has been at the other side of the idea that whiteness is better. Your money can't always save you. And so when you decide to align with wealth instead of with the oppressed nature of your people, just know that's an anti-empathetic stance. And I hope that it does not come back to bite you. I hope it doesn't. I'm not going to say she's overrated. Clearly, the woman had a concert and was able to garner $35 million and people paid it. That means that she's worth it. I'm not going to tell you how to spend your money. I'm just telling you that some people can't afford a driver's license to be able to just drive legally. That some people are sitting in jail because they can't pay the bill related to a parking ticket that got to be extensive. That some people can't afford to put their children in childcare because it is at least $400 a week. A $600 charge would send most US citizens into a spiral that they cannot get out of and would be homeless. I'm not telling you how to spend your money. I'm saying when you take a look at how we behave, what does it say about us? What does it say about us? That we are willing to allow people to starve, that we are willing to allow people to rot in jail, to not be able to get employment because they're poor. Meanwhile, and listen, I'm telling you, the I want to be at the concert. I want to be at the game. I was with Tim Barnett at the KC Bell Fund Project on Thursday, and he was like, "Hey, you gonna be at the Super Bowl?" I will not. I will not. I won't. I've done it. I've paid the money, and I felt guilty, and that's my thing. But I felt guilty for weeks afterwards because I know that for my nephew in jail, that kind of money can mean the difference between at least a subtle amount of comfort versus maybe being at the other end of some violent activity because he has no money. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you that when you take, if you don't mind, get you a copy of the history of racial injustice in this country. Because if you don't have it, you start to see yourself as separate and apart from your people and their struggle. And when you see yourself separate and apart from your people and their struggle, I just don't, we just have so much work to do. We've got so much work to do. And the issues ain't changing, they're the same. That's why we have to look at pick up the rocks. Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great, says, lift up the rock, look at the dirty worms. Putting the rock down don't mean the dirty worms ain't there. It's not. Hey, Ebony. So, one of the things that I've struggled with as I'm trying to launch the Sympathy Revolution, is that typically during Black History Month, I share everything related to the history of racial injustice in this country. Because the reason we need a Black History Month is because we are taking all the things related to Black history, including how we're tied up with poor Blackness, including how we're tied up with queer Blackness, including everything, everything about us. We are not a monolith. We are a vast, beautiful rainbow of lots of difference, just like everybody else. And our stories deserve to be told. And when they are not, how does somebody step into our skin and walk around in it? They can't. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. We got plenty work to do.